Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we have somebody on the show today who's going to tell you why you need to stop training. Joe Dunlap is the son of a U.S. Air Force officer and spent most of his youth moving every 2 years from one Air Force base to another, along with his younger sister. He is a second-generation bachelor and master's degree graduate. Joe entered into learning and development by accident. After completing his undergraduate degree in the Northeast, he applied for numerous jobs in Texas with little luck until a university offered him a position as a hall director, as long as he was a graduate student. Since it was late April at this time, the only department at the university that had rolling applications for grad school was the Department of Education. Joe started a joint program in adult learning and organizational development with no intention of finishing it. 2 years later, he had a master's in education, and he was working in HR at another university in organizational development and some adult learning, and there he is a long, long time later still working in learning and development. Joe started his career as a stand-up facilitator using PowerPoint and Word. As technology evolved into e-learning, podcasting, video, and learning management systems, he was an early adopter, which allowed him to expand his competencies and services. As the use of e-learning and LMSs grew, he became a subject matter expert for learning and development technology, which led him to being a leader of a learning and development technology team. Over the last few years, he has researched, implemented, practiced, and managed the evolving mindsets, practices, technology, and methods being used by organizations in the digital transformation era and implemented those within learning and development as both a leader and consultant. He's also a writer of L&D transformation on LinkedIn. Joe currently lives in Germantown, Wisconsin, with his wife and the last of his 3 daughters, 3 cats, and a dog. He's the only male in the house. Joe Dunlap, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am ready to help you get over the hump, Jim.
Man, I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given my legion a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we get to know you even better?
So you actually said it, Jim. It's stop training. A lot of what I write about, a lot of what I consult about right now is changing that mindset and practice that a lot of learning and development leaders have had for a long time. I am certainly one of those individuals. And where we always thought about the course, we always thought about an e-learning course or a workshop or instruct something instructor-led. And in today's environment, especially with the digital transformation, we just don't have that time anymore. And we have to deliver much quicker for our clients. And we have to be able to pivot on a moment's notice, And so with the growing skills gaps that we're seeing, we're hearing about this all the time. It's how do we now deliver faster? And so what I'm trying to encourage or influence people to do is move away from that training mindset into other possibilities.
Well, and I think what you talk about there is, to me, this isn't really focused in on one particular industry. In addition, I think there's a lot of things that are advancing right now in the whole artificial intelligence and business automation space that's also impacting what we're talking about from a learning and development perspective.
Absolutely.
So if you can, kind of give us a little bit of a look into the impact of what AI can be on stopping training.
Oh, I mean, when you think about all of this, and especially AI, is that if I'm thinking about it from an employee's perspective or an organizational perspective, is now how are we growing those skill sets? 5 years ago, if you and I were having this conversation and someone said data scientist, we both would have looked at each other with a question mark in our head. Today, that same role is making $170,000 a year for a data scientist, okay? So the utilization of AI, machine learning, you're now starting to see positions or occupations that didn't exist in anybody's tongue 3 years ago, 4 years ago. There's not even degrees for some of these things. But there are people who've grown up with these skill sets and have learned how to analyze data and work with machine learning. who are now making a lot of money, but that's now challenging, all employees within an organization of how are they now moving as part of this digital transformation to grow those skill sets, to be help the organization remain competitive in their industry.
Well, even when you talk about that, these whole new job thing is quite interesting. Well, even for me, what I see AI working in the contact center space and customer experience space is that AI is being used as a job aid, is being used as a process flow, follow the leader tool. And I think that is also, when you put that into the whole learning and development mix, really causing more and more, or reinforcing more of that stop training, type of focus. And there's one of the things that you and I had an opportunity to talk about is you talked about that mindset and that first approach. And the first approach used to be build a course. Now you're saying the approach needs to be different. What does it need to be?
Well, and I'm guilty of this, is that, the first thing I typically did throughout my career is, okay, let's go with the solution mindset. And typically that was a course. It may have been e-learning, it may have been instructor-led. Now, as part of this digital transformation, I'm learning new ways like design thinking and agile, which is let's talk about the problem. Because very often the problem has multiple facets to it. And learning development is only one piece of solving that particular problem. And so it's bringing the right people together at the table to brainstorm around multiple ways to do that. And more importantly, Jim, like you talked about, is that, once that training is done, let's go back to that idea of, okay, I did a course or I did a workshop or whatever it was, is now what's next? Because that's not the end of the story, is that once they've gain that competency, that skill, that knowledge, whatever it is. Now, how are you helping them, like you were just talking about, in their flow of work, when they're actually applying that knowledge? What challenges, what successes are they having? What resources do they need on the job to help them continue to grow?
Well, I think for me, there's also, you and I talked about the difference between things that are more technical and short-term in regards to job skills are concerned. And then other elements which are more long-term and journey and development based.
Yes.
So I would dare to say one of the things that I've looked at a lot and have been trying to bring into the contact center world is what is referred to as blended learning. But a lot of people aren't really familiar with what blended learning is. If you could kind of help us.
I think blended learning has multiple connotations. So, when you think about blended learning is what are those resources now that help that individual to continue learning and growing? So an example with a previous client, we were utilizing an internal Yammer channel. So social media, we were creating role-based and or skill-based groups in which these people could come together and share their knowledge and expertise and resources with one another, right? We were utilizing SharePoint as a way of content management because this is where they worked and these were the tools that they worked with. Creating short videos. So very often my team and I, we would actually literally take our phones, our iPhones or our Samsungs, whatever they used, and go and show videos of people working out particular problems and sharing how they solve those problems, and then just literally posting that as a very rough video for other people to use as resources. So you start to think about that learning journey. There's so many different ways in which people now actually go about the means of acquiring learning. That's finding out what your learners are using and then incorporating that into your overall deliverables.
Now, you and I talked about the transformation of the learning and development leader. And as you were talking right there, I started really thinking about, the nuance, the art, and the science of all of this. And that is, for example, like SharePoint. Well, it's a good tool for certain organizations, but then for other organizations, it isn't. So you have to use a different tool. So there's all kinds of different solutions that really have to be explored and understood. But it does start with that mindset to be first of all. But I see one of the transformation points for a learning and development leader, and then think about it from a perspective of someone who's responsible for overall performance. I may not be a traditionally trained L&D leader, but yet I'm responsible, as a supervisor or manager for people's performance and getting the work done, is that, I need to start thinking about overall knowledge assets and managing those assets.
Yes. Absolutely. And now it's, where do I find those assets? How am I not building out? And they're looking for those people. And so it's this idea of learning and development growing itself. And some of the things that I write about is go create your own work. So if you're listening, if you're in the lunchroom, you're at the water cooler, so to speak, you're hearing these stories, these pain points that exist across the organization. Go after them. Start digging into those stories to find out how painful is this experience, this knowledge, this skill, whatever it is. Start finding those and start meeting those learners where they're at, like you're talking about, because you'll find, as I've found, that all of a sudden you're creating your own backlog of work. That people are saying, hey, you built this, can you help me build this? Or how can we start to curate these resources together, and where can we put those resources that help people at that moment of need?
Well, and I think, Joe, I mean, you could probably give better insight into this than I can, is that, talking about how overall, learning and development and the need for it, and really the demand for it has quite changed. And with that, organizational importance. So when we start talking about strategic value, it used to be, oh my gosh, don't train them because they'll leave.
Right.
And I think that's changing too. How have you seen the strategic importance of learning and development change just within the past couple of years?
Oh, if you just read a news article, Jim, there's not a week that goes by where I do not see a CEO or several CEOs who talk about the importance of becoming a learning organization, and I share some of these quotes when I see them on my LinkedIn profile. There was one recently I shared last week, and I'm paraphrasing here, by the CEO of Merck, who said that, he talked about the scale of an organization is losing its relevance to the speed of the organization's learning capacity. And I think he hits the nail on the head, is that if we cannot continue to grow our employees and grow their skill sets and their competencies, we're going to lose to our competition if they're moving faster than we are. And many organizations are now recognizing this. In fact, there was, I think it was a week or two ago, that a bunch of CEOs came out and said, we no longer can focus on shareholder value. We have to focus on our employees improving their value. And I think that message has now made its way across a lot of industries, and a lot of CEOs are recognizing. So the quote, like you said, the CFO said to the CEO, what if we train them and they leave? And the CEO says, what if we don't and they stay? Right? So like you just said, you can't continue to go out and buy these skill sets. You're going to have to start growing them. You're going to have to start reskilling people, because there's just not enough people going around, and that need is growing so quickly that you have to respond to it. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Okay.
So when we start talking about, going through a transformation process, you talk about the mindset. If I start looking at an organization that is, doing some of the things that they've just always done because they're great habit, and we build all these processes around them. You know what? We can do it fast, but the effectiveness has gone away.
Yes.
What are two things that you often have to cause them, or you have to really encourage them to step away from?
Yes. So one of the first things that I do, especially when I'm starting an initiative, is I'm making sure that I'm getting buy-in by all the leaders impacted. And I did this very recently with a client. Was we were going to roll out this leadership initiative. And so I met with all the leaders across the organization. And I had several leaders, maybe probably close to about a fourth of them, who said, Joe, right now is not the time. We have these other priorities going on. And I really appreciated them saying that, because it allowed me to focus on those people who were ready to embrace that at that moment and be my advocates as well. And they made a world of difference, because they were fully in support of it, and they were able to push forward. And that way, when some of those other leaders were finally ready to, having gotten those other priorities off of their plate, so to speak, they were now ready to embrace it too, because I was meeting them at their right moment.
Well, as you were saying that, I also started thinking of the fact that, once they decided to essentially take themselves out and they saw other people embracing it and moving ahead, that it was a threat.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny, I did a couple years ago, I was with a large company, and, like you said, it was 150 years old. They had a lot of processes in place. Certainly the organizational culture was very much face-to-face and things like that. And they realized that they were just not keeping up with their competition. And so they were going through this organizational change, and culture always trumps everything. So, the CEO recognized we have to start changing our culture. And there's early adopters and late adopters. And so by helping in leading that particular change, I went for the early adopters first, because they became my advocates for the people who were still kind of sitting back saying, well, this is the flavor of the day. We'll just wait 2 years and it'll be gone. By the time they finally realized that this was not going away, there was a whole lot of stories out there and resources for them to become fully engaged with it, as well as having good mentors.
So to me, I think it goes back to that whole short-term versus long-term focus. And that if I'm, someone who needs to go through this transformation, and let me take a step back. And I would say that everybody needs to go through this transformation. I, even myself, with Call Center Coach Academy, see so many organizations that, really don't understand what the whole difference between, task, short-term technical skill, and long-term, leadership development, really is. It's
absolutely.
Unfortunately, like you said, we all kind of opt for the classroom. We opt for the workshop. We think that, hey, just give them the information and then therefore the action's going to happen. And it's just not the way it works.
You're right. You're absolutely right. In fact, actually, I was leading an initiative with a contact center very recently. And we became aware of some pain points that certainly were not trained, and there were no resources in which to help those call center representatives with that. And so we built out a number of materials, basically job aids, to help them with that. But it was very hard for leadership to start now embracing this idea of these huddle type of trainings versus a classroom base to bring people up with speed on these things. And I struggled with it a little bit, to be honest with you, because in my mind, as I'm looking at this information, I knew that the customer service reps were not well versed in these topics because they were pain points. The quality was showing that, but they were focused, like you said, on the metrics and meeting service level agreements and not recognizing that, okay, the forest through the trees, so to speak, is that, okay, but these pain points don't go away if you don't address them. So great, you meet your service levels, great, you meet your quality, but you're still not helping the customer because your customer service reps don't understand the information that's in front of them. And I'm still pounding away at that, Jim. I really am. There's some people who have now started to come around and say, okay, let's try some things. There's some who are still kind of pushing back on me on that. And it's a culture shift.
Well, and I think what you said, kind of going back a little bit full circle, you started talking about truly uncovering, the problem, and that being really where the mindset shift needs to happen.
Yep.
So when you start talking about, that different lens and you causing people to look in places that they, are just not accustomed to doing.
Yes.
What do you often find that is preventing you from making people to make that head turn?
Very often it's the organizational culture, is that, they built up, for lack of a better word, the command and control structure. And so when those subject matter experts, who very often become those call center leaders, get into those roles, they come with great technical knowledge. But like you just said, it's very hard for them to look outside of just my channel right in front of me to understand that there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on around here that is impacting what you're doing, and that can help you to benefit that. And so it's just overcoming that organizational culture, is that there's a lot of players who can bring enhanced productivity and effectiveness if you're willing to now embrace some of that mindset versus the straight ahead linear thinking.
Well, and KPIs are important for every single part of a business, those key performance indicators. So Absolutely. If you could kind of give me an understanding of that when that shift has occurred and people get on board, they start doing things differently. What are we talking about as far as a KPI impact?
I've been incorporating some different measures lately. And so one of the things that a lot of organizations are looking at is employee engagement. So as we talk about the world of digital transformation and social media, I've been incorporating some measures that might be typically used on a Twitter or a Facebook or something like that. So if we push out some videos or some learning resources, not only am I sharing their usage, but I'm sharing how many shares, how many likes, how many did they share that with. And so I'm trying to incorporate more measures based on the delivery and the channels that I used that now help build a much bigger story for my client to see that there's a much bigger picture out here than just simply, for instance, ROI or some of the key measures that they're looking at. Because, it's very easy for us to get locked into, did we meet our quality metrics, or did we meet our service level agreements, or things like that. But there's, like you just said, there's a whole lot of other story out there that once they start to become aware of it, you start to see that light bulb come on in their head as, oh, wait a minute, there's some other things out here that really make a difference, especially when you talk about a call center environment, to keep people here versus the kind of retention problems that most of them experience.
Well, gosh, Joe, as you were talking, I started seeing the role and the skills of the L&D people. And again, even if they're traditionally trained or if they're in a manager role, that needs to shift and to quite a significant degree for some. Because, as you were just describing what you were doing, I started thinking about internal communications.
Yeah.
I started thinking about internal marketing.
Yes.
That's different than just communications.
Yeah.
Exactly. You started talking about, the whole, the cultural aspects and the cultural transformation piece. performance management. I mean, I'm starting to see a whole different level of skills that are needed in L&D people that just didn't exist.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what's going on with the digital transformation. My personal experience with this has been in an organization that was working agile, is that in some cases I was leading an effort. So I might have been referred to as a product owner. In other cases, I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm an individual contributor. And so I was taking on those roles of, as we started to see how learning was being consumed and the ways in which it was being consumed by our learners, you have to meet them where they're at. So the idea of me dragging you as that learner to the learning management system is not working anymore. It's I now need to come to where Jim does his work and deliver to Jim in the way that he wants it delivered. So I might need to learn how to use Twitter or Instagram, or learn how to make and edit videos, or learn how to be a web developer in SharePoint. And so whatever it is that your learners are using, you're building those skill sets. And that only helps you in your future, Jim, because again, you may be in instances where maybe you're not leading that effort and maybe even learning is a part of that, but you have a role or multiple roles you might be able to play, and that makes you a much more valuable player.
Well, Joe, I would dare to say with the transformation that you're talking about, and I see it with all types of transformations, that we really need to focus. We need some inspiration, and we need some things that are continual reminders of the effort that we need to put forth and the resilience. And one of the things that we look at on the show to help us with those types of things are quotes. So is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
I do. There's actually two quotes. So for any individual in learning development, it goes like this: if you are learning, you are growing. If you ain't growing, what are you doing? Right? And so that's actually a quote on my LinkedIn page. A lovely woman who was the vice president down at an organization in Nebraska found that one time and massively distributed that across a whole network of people. And then I started getting all these people liking and sharing and instant messaging me and whatever your LinkedIn messaging me. And I was like, wow, that's fantastic that they really meant that much to her. Something that simple resonated with her and then resonated with her network. As a learning and development leader, is that one of the most valuable things I learned from a previous leader was you got to have humility and humor about yourself, because you can't know everything. You are not the expert in everything. And so I very much follow the Steve Jobs mindset, is I don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. I hire smart people to tell me what to do. So as I'm growing my team, I've grown 2 teams in my history. I'm bringing them on board because they bring skill sets to the table that I don't have. I don't need somebody else telling me or doing what I already do. I need somebody doing what I can't do and showing me how to do that. And I've been very fortunate in my past where I brought in the right group of people who had skill sets beyond what I had, and I'm asking them, okay, show me what it is we need to do. Tell me what it is we need to do, and helping us to lead to new discoveries and new journey for ourselves.
Well, Joe, talking about building those teams, talking about transformation, talking about taking a different path than what everybody else is going down. I mean, those are things that happen because of learning experiences that we've had. And on the show, we talk about getting over the hump because they set us hopefully in a better direction. And most oftentimes they do. Is there a time where you got over the hump that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. I was with an organization about 5-6 years ago, and I was talking about it earlier. They were starting to lose to their competition. They had very traditional hierarchies and processes, and other organizations were being much more experimental and innovative, and they were doing things faster. And the organization that I work for realized we're losing to our competition. We need to change the way we do. And so with that initiative, I challenged my team, and they challenged me in the same mindset, was we need to start thinking differently of how we deliver learning and how we support performance across this organization. And so through a number of brainstorming and strategy sessions, we started coming up with ideas based on the things that we had heard across the organization of the how and the means in which people were actually learning. So we started exploring the use of video. We started exploring the use of social media, the internal Yammer channel I talked about, how to become web developers in SharePoint. So we started moving away from that whole training mindset and starting to look more of this, what is that learning ecosystem is for an individual or for a team? And what is the learning journey that we can create? And so that really became our mindset. Was it was no longer easy, or no longer could we go through the idea of a one and done and we move on. It was, you're building a course, you're doing some instructor-led workshop, it's what's next. Now you're following that story as those individuals, whether they be leaders or individual contributors, as they go out and apply that knowledge and skill, you follow them. through those experiences to say, okay, what were your successes? What were your challenges? What would have helped in this? And you start to build up all the resources they need around that way, hopefully over a short period of time, the next person who comes through that learning journey has a much easier than the person that went before them. And you just keep improving upon that.
Well, I would dare to say the whole transformation process also takes a while. And also when I start talking and thinking about learning and development, transforming and people doing things different, that's just going to take a while. But when
Absolutely.
I think about, you and the whole, stop training method and focus and all of that, I started thinking about you having certain goals and also the content that you create and all of that. But if I was to look at one goal that you had, what should I be looking at?
One goal for me is continuous learning. I am always looking for what's my next thing to learn about. And I'm basing that on what I'm seeing in the industry, right? So most recently, like for instance, the World Economic Forum came out with their top 20 skills for 2020, critical thinking, creative thinking, things like that. So those are the things I start exploring for myself. So that way, when I'm having these dialogues with people, I can share what I've learned on my journey, which helps make me hopefully a better, bring more value and a better partner to my clients and to the people I work with.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best.
Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better.
All right, Fast Leader Legion, it's time for the
Hump Day Hoedown.
Okay, so the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions. And your job is to give us robust, yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Joe Dunlap, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready to hoe down.
All right. So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Organizational culture. You're still fighting an organizational culture that exists, and changing those mindset and practices will always slow you down.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
The best leadership advice I ever received is be humble in your practice and have humor in yourself. Knowing that you're not going to be the person who knows everything, and it's good to have humor about that as you're actually becoming a better leader every day.
And what is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
That I listen to smart people. I want the advice of people who are telling me what they think the solution is versus going along my own immediate solution or thought process.
And what do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
I think it is that personal approach. So like I talked about before, it's embracing that other people have opinions and ideas and experiences, and that I want to hear them so that I can incorporate them into my overall effort of what I'm trying to produce.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our Legion? And it could be from any genre.
I would recommend it's actually more of a documentary, and it's something I saw very recently on Netflix, and it's the Steve Jobs, Bill Gates story. And as you watch, and this covers their entire history from the 1970s well into 2000, and it talks about how they changed an entire industry. They made an entire industry. So here's two individuals that have both dropped out of college. They both had these ideas of how to now transform the way that we work, the way that we live. And that to me was valuable as I watched that documentary, because I think we're seeing it. We see it every day, is that we have these people who are transforming the way that we live, and we have to open up our mindset to anything is possible.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Joe Dunlap. Okay, Joe, this is my last Hump Day Hold On question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25. You have all the knowledge and skills that you have now, and it's your ability to take back, but you can't take it all. You can only take one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
What skill or piece of knowledge would I take back with me? The openness to change. And the reason I would do that is because I think very early in my career, and certainly throughout my time as a leader, probably till about within the last 7 to 10 years, is I had a mindset in place of what a leader did and how they thought, and that I was giving orders and telling people to do this. And now seeing the transformation that we in, I wish I would have stepped back much earlier in my career and embraced other thoughts and processes and ideas, that probably would have made me a much better individual contributor and leader than I am today.
Joe, it was fun to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. You can find me on my LinkedIn profile, Joseph Dunlap. I am currently an independent contractor and I live in Germantown, Wisconsin. I would love to hear from you.
Joe Dunlap, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump.
Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.